Oh God. Boys, it's all coming apart. The center cannot hold. Yeah, we're on day 42 of this continuous live streaming where I've been doing this every morning. And I have to tell you, day 42 is definitely the point where it's getting much harder to like get up in the morning and do it. I'm finding myself like eating weird and just being like in general much more prone to just compulsive behavior, like you know what I mean, man. It's just, you put like an extra 20 hours of work into something every week, and it starts to take a toll on a motherfucker. You know what I mean? But I digress, because toll or not, we're not here to whine. We're here to edit a award-winning novel. Hopefully, it hasn't won any awards yet. But you never know, man. There's all kinds of stuff going on. So, yeah, just even in the face of being like kind of out of it the past couple of days and whatever, we got to exhibit some resiliency and get through this whole deal, because otherwise, like, what are we even doing here? All right, so let me just test. Hell yeah. Okay, cool. So chat's working. All right, let's begin. What have we got going on? Shouts to Jewbird right there, who says, nice, I watch the stream every time. What an asshole. What do we got here? Can we talk about the weird ass people who tweet about Wednesday wisdom and Wednesday motivation every week on Twitter? I don't know, man. Twitter people are fucking weird. Like, I only tweet stuff that I think is funny on there, and I guess all the Periscope broadcasts show up there. So shout outs if you're here from Periscope. My last tweet was thanking Joe Rogan that now all my students are referring to suicide as self-Epstein. But yeah, that meme is so played into the fucking dirt, man. Everybody's heard it a million times. What do we got here? So I guess we're at chapter 58 already. And at 400 pages, we can say that we're well and truly halfway through the writing of this book. So that's a positive thing here. Let's go into this Starball chapter once again. So, in a single utterance, all my schemes could be undone. This is the greatest difficulty of all. I cannot confide even in myself. So I want something like unwise there. What do we got there? So we have a request. Oh, damn it. I didn't see what that chat. Can I request that there be no page 404 in the book? Yeah. That's a spoiler. Okay. Okay, so I can't remove it from the actual book, because even though that's funny, it's not the right kind of book for that joke. But what we can do is we can absolutely, hold on, let me get back to Restream, because the chat is fucking up there and wasn't displaying your YouTube chat, and I need that chat. Anyhow, what we do, so here's a little something about publishing. When you put out a book, essentially you create a typeset version of it that's as close to perfect as you can really get, but it's understood that there's still going to be like some typos and shit in there. That's called an ARC. ARC stands for Advanced Reader's Copy, or some people call it like an Advanced Reader's Edition or whatever. Basically, ARCs are like promo books that you send around. They'll have pretty clearly on their cover type, it'll say Advanced Reader's Edition somewhere, not for resale, etc. And like basically, it used to be that the structure of books was such that like you were on such like a tight schedule that sometimes you would try to get the books to reviewer. Well, always you would try to get the books to reviewers and industry people, get it into their hands before the actual release of the book. And it would just coincide that their production schedule was such that typesetting wouldn't normally be complete, but it was still helpful to get like those reviews started and everything, and start generating a buzz. Yeah, that's not fucking happening there. So that's what an arc essentially is. So I can make ebooks skipped 404 for formats that support page numbers. I just put in like a big block of page breaks there. But yeah, like it's kind of useless to skip page 404 in a book. So on the page, by the way, I would just put page not found there just to fuck with people. But anyhow, I digress. So let's work a little bit on this. So in a single, I want something like unwise utterance. I actually kind of like careless there. Let's take a look. Negligent, reckless. I like careless. In a single careless utterance, all my schemes could be undone. This is the greatest difficulty of all. I cannot confide even in myself. My blueprint, this is awful. My blueprints are written in auto-schidiastic alien poetry, inscrutable even to the author. Yeah, that's too far. Inscrutable even to their creator. I march my glass marionettes in a senseless pantomime. Aware, this is so overblown. I think that we may. Oh, what do we got here? We got Sincerely Jayton. Hey, welcome to the stream. This is my editing stream. We do this every single day, regardless of how much we might want to do it. It's a science fiction book about a young woman who finds an alien probe. This is a chapter written by the alien probe called the Starball. And the Starball is just the kind of nigga that would say, I march my glass marionettes in a senseless pantomime, aware that even the slightest pattern within the chaos could shatter everything. I am certain there will only be a single chance, 1/6. All right, yeah, that needs tuning that I can't provide at this time. But let's make a goal right here. Even though I'm like pretty flighty today, one, my goal is going to be to get in bed by like 10 o'clock tonight, if at all possible. Two, my second goal is going to be to get through chapter 58 today. And yeah, I just got to get back on track a little bit. I think when you're pushing yourself to kind of like your limits of how productive and everything you can be, you'll start to see things fray at the seams. And I just got to find some measure of control in my life. I'm spinning off the rails, boys. Okay, so let's get through. I have to get this. I have to get this. I have to get this. It's like she's Thomas the Tank Engine there. The school day was almost through. It took all of Freya's willpower to stay focused on Mr. Manzini. If she let her attention slip for even an instant, her mind would gallop ahead to seeing Dan after school. So not a semicolon there. Same subject in both of these clauses. Mr. Manzini was studiously avoiding eye contact with Freya, but everyone else's eyes seemed to linger on her. They were all waiting for her to fall apart again. I won't, Freya thought, her brow creasing with determination. I'm getting better. I can do this. Her hand dipped into her pocket for the Starball. All day it had been merely warm. She wondered if it had overtaxed itself last night. She caught... So we discussed how Starball chapters are a little overwrought by design. Just because it's our design doesn't mean that design is a good idea. You know what I mean? And in fact, there are limits to how overwrought something can be. And if I would like read through that chapter and just be like, flip, you know, you never want to have Sansa chapters. So lid closed. The star ball is an entity that is necessarily full of itself. Okay, good luck, Spathywell. Her mind had wandered. Now she had no clue what Mr. Manzini was saying. Her mind wandered down the line of inquiry. Soon she had no clue what Mr. Manzini was saying. So we have kind of like a tense break right there. Mm-hmm. And when she tuned back into the class, she found she had no clue what Mr. Manzini was saying. I have to get this. Mm-hmm. So that's not italicized. Freya bit down on her lower lip, trying to focus. Conjugates are radical expressions, such as radical A plus radical B, or radical A minus radical B, Mr. Manzini droned. Like radicals are radical expressions that have the same index and the same radicand. I don't know what a radicand is. Freya was utterly lost, so am I. The word streamed past her, meaningless as the burble of... Oh, yeah. Words streamed past her, meaningless as the burbling of a river. Glancing around, Freya could see she wasn't the only one. Faces were scrunched in incomprehension. What the what? Glancing around, Freya could see she wasn't the only one. Faces were scrunched in incomprehension. Pens were chewed, heads lowered in defeat. So there we need a colon, right? Because we're like listing three things. And it's just basically Freya can see she's not the only one. Clause, clause, clause. Cool. And we do a colon there because it's a list of things rather than just one or two pseudo-independent clauses. I think. You know, feel free to correct me on any of this grammar. By the way, like, if you're reading the stream and you know more than I do about anything, please feel free to issue corrections, because Lord only knows it's getting late. You know what I mean? I've like been working hard to learn a little bit better grammar, even though that sentence was a train wreck. But you know, I'm not an expert in this shit. You know, I'm a meat and potatoes and lasers and explosions kind of guy. This is all new territory to me. Like, this is the most pseudo-literary thing I've ever written. And it's still fucking weird. Freya longed for Mrs. Jean, her Algebra 1 teacher. Her method was so different. She would give them a practical problem. Miss Jean's method was so different. Miss Jean's teaching method was so different. She would give them a practical problem, leave them alone for a while to try and figure it out. She would give them a practical problem, then leave them alone. She would give them a practical problem, then leave them alone for a while to try and figure it out themselves. Afterwards, she would swoop in with a formula that made it all seem so easy and simple. Afterwards, she would swoop in with a formula that made it all seem simple and easy. Freya loved the feeling Freya had loved the feeling of Freya had loved the feeling of things clicking into place, the sudden burst of understanding. She never felt that way in Mr. Manzini's class. Even when she finally got something, she still felt like she was... Even when she finally comprehend. Assimilated, envisioned, apprehended. Even when she finally got something, she still felt like she was way behind, just clinging on for survival. A lot of exposition in this page right here. Like, one, it's a little bit of exposition because it's a flashback to a teacher that she liked previously, and trying to explain why she's struggling in this class, which I think is maybe worthwhile. Learned. Oh, yeah, that's kind of... It's worthwhile. Let's try it. Let's try it in a sentence. Even when she finally learned something, she still felt... So we are looking for something with like a little bit more of her apprehending something. But apprehend is not the right word there. Learned, even when she finally learned something. Like, how often do you say, like, oh, I finally learned that thing? You know, like, it doesn't fit there. Envisaged, understood. Oh, yeah, I like the idea of an idea clicking, but that's a little bit of... That's a little trite. Oh, the Spathy Waz meeting was canceled. Nice. Oh, grasp. That's what we wanted. Even when she finally grasped the lesson, she felt like she was way behind. She still felt like she was way behind, just clinging on for survival. I like that because it's like grasp and then she's clinging. So you really get a little bit of like she's hanging off of the rain-slick precipice on the cliffs of doom. Fuck Penny Arcade, by the way. Awful comic. That sentence should have a comma. Do we need this clause? She still felt like she was way behind, just clinging on for survival. We could do that as, even when she finally grasped a lesson, she felt like she was just clinging on for survival. Nah, it doesn't work without the way behind aspect of it there. That was another thing. There is nothing here in... That was another thing. There was nothing here and nothing in Mr. Manzini's class Freya could touch. So one of the things that we see in throughout the book, Freya has been fairly tactile. It's not always like touching the star ball. A lot of focus on touch, maybe more so than any of her senses, which is weird for somebody that we're describing as like fairly musical. So it might be worthwhile to cerebral lateralization. Oh yeah. It might be worthwhile to just go back a little bit or try to focus a little bit more on what she's hearing. Because for somebody who is meant to be such a musical character, most of the perception is like one emotion for her. And a lot of it is, yeah, so actually, what I like to do... Yeah, I feel like in this book we don't talk a lot about what things sound like outside of there's like some description of like rivers and whatever. We get to some more musical chapters later on, but I don't think we've. I feel like it. We go very often to the well of how she's feeling in her physical body, and not very often to what do things sound like. So that's like not something you can just like wave your dick at something and have it happen magically. That's like an entire thing for the second edit. Ghoster. Oh, this is funny. Svethy Was says Ghoster, an online dating platform that stops relaying messages at a random point in the conversation. Well, it seems like game theory. Everybody would just like include their phone number in their first message. You know what I mean? So Stratum says I have played and become intermediate level on guitar, synths, and mediocre and a melodica, which is a wind type instrument that I didn't know of. Have played in front of audiences of 30 or 40 people multiple times. And for me, any thinking of music is always about the physical feel. That's kind of interesting there. Especially in my mind, the experience of playing guitar is among like the more tactile instruments. More so than you think about pianos as being, or synthesizers as being kind of tactile. But I don't think of drums in the same, like you feel the drum mallets in your hands, but you're not like fucking caressing strings. And I wonder if stringed instruments have more, like non-bowed stringed instruments have like a more appeal to people who are very tactile. So that actually kind of works out a little bit there. Because, honestly, if I'm playing guitar, I'm thinking a lot more of the fingering than I am even on an instrument like a saxophone, where the like fingering is a big part of it, but it's not quite the same. You know what I mean? Pressing the notes, plucking, blowing. Oh, shout outs to Chad right there. Shout outs to the real MK Ultra Discord. Heads were lowered in the feet. Okay, so I do like that whole thing. And I think that's a helpful note there. That just because she's a musician, we shouldn't just leap to being like she's got to think about sound all the fucking time. But I think it is an okay note that somebody who cares so deeply about music and who presents at least slightly on the spectrum should be more aware of the noises around them, even if a lot of it is just like, it's too fucking loud in here. I can't deal. Or like, why is that smoke detector keep chirping in the background? It's driving me batshit. So a few notes of that would also go more towards our representation of her as somebody who is slightly on the spectrum. But I digress. It's not like we're trying to shoehorn autism into this book. Like it really, really is part of the core character design as somebody who is fairly awkward and fairly precocious and not well liked even in our circle of friends there. And I think that we may have not made her awkward enough, right? She hasn't like fucked up in any of the like there's no point where she like I don't think we actively make her do anything that is like a big social mistake. Outside of like she blunders kind of in the pizza scene, but it's more just being like kind of too arrogant than anything. So yeah, there's another spot where we may have to go back and tune up a little bit. But again, these are questions for another edit. Miss Jean's classroom had been full of there was nothing to hold on to in Mr. Manzini's classroom, just the whiteboard and his terrible handwriting. I wonder if this is a good point to make like a point about how things that are on a screen always seem more ephemeral than, even if you think about it, like writing on a digital whiteboard doesn't quite have the same power as chalk on a blackboard, because the chalk is going to fucking stay there. If we turn off the whiteboard, the message is gone. Maybe it's saved in RAM or memory or something like that. But there's this idea that anything that you see on a screen could change at any moment. And things that are written down printed on paper have an immutable quality to it. And there's been some research to indicate that people actually learn things much better from something that's printed than something that's on like the screen of a phone or something like that. Let's edit the coming insurrection right here. I'm going to edit an erection into every page of this book. How about that? So e-ink stays there if it's off, right? Kind of true, but like your fucking Kindle will still do that like screensaver with an ad if they're still doing that on Amazon. It's not the same. And most digital whiteboards in classes are not e-ink; they're just LCDs. For the most part, e-ink is really expensive in these large format things. But yeah, like I don't think it's an appropriate place to put it here, but definitely something that's always on my mind as somebody who writes a ton is the ephemerality of text on a screen. And like if the people who are like listening to this right now at this very moment, not people who will someday study it in courses or whatever, they are very aware of like much of our lives is just text on screens. The coming insurrection by an invisible committee. Hell yeah. Shout out to communists. Fucking, oh, I don't know if y'all watched that Democrat debate last night there. Fucking Warren not shaking old Bernardo's hand. Lying Liz trending on fucking Twitter. Wild shit. Speaking of wild shit, I'm going to need a few seconds to compose myself. I shall return. You guys are in charge. Write whatever you want. All right, hell yeah. Let me see. Oh, snap, it's a gift. My dogs used to do that sometimes, refusing to sleep, unable to stay awake. I had to go to bed to stop. It's kind of cute that they just like so want to be around you. That dogs are. I really want to get another dog, but I just not in a point right now where I can do it. Just because like at my office, we're not allowed to bring dogs in. The kids would freak out. So is the dog okay? But yeah, it'd be like, if I get fired from my job or something like that, or get to do this full time ever, I'm definitely gonna have like a dog cam because I think that'll bring in so many viewers. Like if I just had like moved half of this shit over, right, and just like the top screen was just like a dog sleeping in a bed, I literally get 20 more viewers just on like having a picture of a doggo. Hell yeah. Mm. So people are shouting out to Krav Maga, which I think Dark Mage is now employing out there in California. Whew, yeah, a real writer would have just powered through that like emergency trip to the bathroom, but I'm not quite at the level where I'm willing to strap on a diaper or stew here in my own waste to power through chapters. There was nothing to hold on to in Mr. Manzini's classroom, just a whiteboard and terrible handwriting. The classroom was always a few degrees too warm. Everyone seemed listless and drowsy. Freya drifted into thoughts of Dan, of getting her hands on him. Before she knew it, the class was ending and everyone was packing up to go. Freya blinked, wondering how much she'd missed. She had to stop zoning out. She was definitely going to fail if she couldn't get it together. She packed everything up and the zipper of her book bag got caught on a fringe of fabric. As she tried to get it free, she noticed her fingers were trembling. All day long she'd been dying to see Dan, and now that she could, she felt nervous. I don't like now that she could, she felt nervous. Mm-hmm. Now she felt nervous. The a power upon her was cliche. And now she was getting nervous. Okay, so this right here, where we're adding a note of her rehearsing the things that she would like to tell him, super Audie, right? And like people who I've heard of people who will like rehearse the things that they want to say on a phone call before they make it because they don't trust themselves to do it in the moment, which is kind of neat. I like that idea. She'd rehearse the things she wanted to tell Dan, trying to think of questions he would ask. She'd rehearse the things she wanted to say, trying to think of the questions he might ask, places he would get upset. Yeah, trying to think of the questions he would ask, the places he would. All the places he might get upset. Now I felt like, oh my god. Now I felt like all that preparation was wasted. Yeah, I apologize entirely. But I am gonna have to return again in a second. Let's ponder really hard on this paragraph. I'll be right back. Good God. Good God. Lord, I don't know what's gotten into me, but I know what's coming out. Damn. What do we got here? Censorship chest. Oh, I turned off the censor bot. What, cunt is globally banned? Oh, that's on the Twitch level. I think I can opt out of that. I think the Twitch Ultimate, I think it just cuts out like hard R and maybe cunt and like maybe a few other things. But yeah, I turned off the fucking bot. It was driving me crazy. One other thing that's driving me crazy. Ugh. Shout out to how filthy those shorts are, the ones that I paint in. Yeah, I might, I've been thinking about, you know, like the intro video or whatever. I was thinking about just recording a bunch that are just kind of like paint slowly flowing down stuff and rippling and shit like that, and putting together like a VJ pack of those. The only problem is it's like kind of impossible to loop them without doing like a fade into one or the other there. But there we go. Okay, cool. Mm-hmm. Freya had been dying to see Dan all day, and she was growing more nervous by the minute. She'd rehearsed all the things she wanted to say, trying to think of the questions she would ask, all the places he might get upset. Now it felt like all that preparation was wasted. There was no way Dan could understand. What if he freaked out? What if he never wanted to see her again? What if he told Dr. Garbuglio about this and got her committed? And got them both committed. What if he told someone and they both wound up in a mental hospital? All right, so I think that's a little bit better because I didn't want to have like the double mention of Dr. Garbuglio. And then you can see the progression of her thoughts from mental hospital to Dr. Garbuglio. The two would be interlinked in her mind. I think that's like a decent transition that would go along well with that character's point of view. So I'm happy with that. Mm. Imagine the best possible outcome, Dr. Garbuglio had told her. Freya tried to think about everything turning out okay. Freya tried as hard as she could to envision things turning out okay. She took a deep breath through her nose and exhaled slowly, then worked the zipper free. Mr. Manzini smiled at her and waved as she left. She managed an awkward wave back. She was doomed when the test came. If only Betty were taking this class with her. If only she had someone to help her figure this out. But Betty was 1,000 miles away. She still hadn't replied to Freya's last email. There was no one for her but the orb. Freya shook her head, dropped her books in her locker, and headed for the parking lot. All right. So yeah, like a little bit of improvement there. We really had like a pretty expository chapter. Let's take a look at what work this chapter is actually doing. So this is okay. We reiterate some of her fears that she's failing the class. I like that it explains a little bit why she's failing this class as a good student. Because even if you're a great student and try really hard and didn't just have your dad get killed and aren't in a telekinetic relationship, then, you know, like a bad teacher matchup can really make it difficult to get through stuff. And I like that we show that Mr. Manzini still cares and he's still trying to do his job. He's just not stellar at teaching her in the particular way that she would learn. It doesn't necessarily mean that other students, although we do show other students having a hard time, but there's definitely a certain type of math student where they respond well. They're just not having any distractions or anything. Just this is the lesson. I don't know. There's a lot of interesting ways that you can go about who you're really teaching to in education, and people have a lot of different theories. But I digress. So yeah, I like that. I like showing some of her uncertainty. I like the nod to Betty. Okay, so yeah, this chapter can stay. It's okay. A gauntlet of staring eyes awaited Freya as she approached the pickup lane by the bike racks. It wasn't only the other students. She felt like the parents were gawking at her too. It wasn't only the other students. She felt like the parents were gawking at her too. She had a strong urge to just pull the hood up. She had a strong urge to pull the hood of her sweatshirt up. Pull up her hood and disappear under it. Pull up, nigga. She had a strong urge to pull up the hood of her jacket and disappear under it. Instead, she drew in air through her teeth and held her head up, staring back at the. She wanted everyone to know she wasn't afraid of Malcolm Lewis or anyone else. Dan's pale blue Toyota was close to the front of the pickup line. His was the only face that lit up for her. Hey, Freya, he smiled. Hey, Freya. He smiled like nothing strange had passed between them, and they were just two students about to go to a drive. Mm-hmm. Staring back equals Lassa's daughter. Ooh. Hmm. And held her head up, meeting the stairs. She wanted everyone to know she wasn't afraid of Malcolm Lewis or anyone else. It's really like an interesting point that we want to keep some of these things that that just indicate that as much as she has been kind of like a meek and unassuming character in a lot of this, and I think there are a lot of spots where the readers are kind of like crying out, like, "Hey, do something about this. Don't just fucking sit there and let people step on you." Um, I like where we get to the flashes of, yeah, this is the daughter of an interrogator, and like doesn't have to stand up for this bullshit. She has the secret to alien immortality in her pocket. So, or whatever the hell the secret is. Oh, oh, Stratum, like, I think those are, I can't tell if they're Pepe's or Don't Tread on Me snakes from, I think they're snakes. King of Snake. Dan's pale blue Toyota was close. We don't need pale blue there. Whatever, I'm going to leave it. He smiled like nothing strange had passed between them, and they were just two kids about to go for it. So, friends, kids. Use, and like, I know why I use students there. Um, to ordinary kids. I feel like people really misuse and overuse ordinary. It's just an ordinary, it's super cliche. Yeah, let's stick with that. Hey, Dan, she smiled back, forgetting to be nervous for a moment. They didn't catch him yet, huh? Nope. They sent a car to his mother's house this morning. So people would say they didn't catch him yet, but they didn't catch Malcolm yet, huh? Nope. Yeah, so Friends really has like, Friends really has like a different import there. Yeah, they haven't been friends for really long enough also. And in this instance, like I like, so kids carries with it a little bit of an understanding that, you know, she's 16 and he's 18. They're not adults. You know, they're not even close to being adults. And like what they're about to do is like something fairly trivial. So kids contradicts the sexual overtones and is an effective contrast to what the reader knows. I think so. And also like there aren't really sexual overtones in this chapter yet. We have like a one minor one where she's like, "Oh, can't wait to get my hands on him." She does not do those head movements in the book. Just FYI. But nope. They sent a car out to his mother's house this morning, but they can't find him. I'm a little worried Lasso will find him before the police do. What? For real? Oh yeah, we don't need that. For real? Yeah, she's friends with Radamir's dad. Radamir was a paratrooper. For real? Yeah, she's friends with Radamir's dad. Dadamir was a paratrooper. I could kind of see the two of them hunting him down. Jesus. Jesus, Dan muttered. Okay, so yeah, like it's not just said there. It really is like more of a like kind of under his breath. Oh shit, yeah. Vapor is saying R.I.P. Angie. Somebody please convey my R.I.P. Angie to the crowd. I just so fucking stupid to lose chatters because they're like beefing with other chatters. But I don't know. Well, it feels like once people start to get delicate with their chat, they're not long for this chat. You know what I mean? Like somebody emo parts once, they're gonna do it again a bunch of times. I mean, they probably won't, Freya added, picking up on his discomfort. Dan hadn't even cracked a grin at Dadamir. Oh. So here, we want Dan's discomfort. He hadn't even cracked a grin at Dadamir. That just tracks a little bit better to my eye. Anyhow, he doesn't matter. Do you want to go somewhere to talk? How heavy is this going to be? Dan asked. So what work is Dan asked doing in that sentence right there? Do you want to go somewhere and talk? How heavy is this going to be? Pretty heavy. Freya admit. Yeah, we need. I want the ask there. The ask lets you put the admission. Pretty heavy, Freya admitted. Can we go for a run first? I didn't get out this morning. It usually helps me calm down. There was something a little frantic behind the words, since Dan was only barely holding it together. Since Dan was barely holding it together. His left hand was in a tight grip on the steering wheel. Freya realized Dan was just as nervous as she was. We can do that, she agreed. So I like this here. Just like that little, fuck, you know. So we got shout outs to Marty McFly happening right here. On the way to Nading Hill Park, she talked with him about his day. Do kids still use heavy in 2029? Yeah, maybe it's making a comeback or whatever. This is a question for our child consultant right there. On the way to Nading Hill Park, she talked with Dan about his day. He'd spent the morning taking the ASVAB. And do we say where he takes it? Because I think he has to drive to a different town in... I think it says like Marion or something like that. Oh, yeah. Yeah, I can't find that thing. Mm. But yeah, it's a reasonable question. Does heavy already sound dated? Um, how much of that is like slang? Like, what's another word that we would use there? Like serious. Let's see how that tracks. How serious is this going to be? Pretty serious. No, I like it there. Oh, shouts to Radborn right there. Can we go for a run first? His left hand was in it. We can do that. He spent the morning taking the ASVAB. The Armed Services Vocational Aptitude Battery was the test everyone had to take to get into the military. As she listened, Dan describe it, Freya found herself wanting to take the test as well, just to see how she would do. So that's like +1 autism points right there, wanting to take a test just to see how you do on it. I'm not sure how offensive non-IRC people will find our like frank usage of autism in that capacity, but just understand that in our social culture, like autism is like an everyday factor of many conversations that we have right there, and autistic people are more accepted on IRC than they are in the real world. Like you have to put up with these people essentially. They're like in your shit all the time. So we're in a way like less tolerant of certain behaviors, but more accepting of the individuals when they can keep those behaviors in check, just because of the nature of text-based communication. So if it sounds like we're hard on autistic people, we are. And people with, we're usually talking about high functioning autistic people. People who are lower functioning generally just get banned out of our chats because they don't fit within our discourse. So anyhow, if it sounds like we're hard on people who are on the spectrum, we are, but at the same time, we're accepting them into our social groups in a way which I think many of these people are not accepted into standard everyday social groups. And it's an interesting point to consider right there. Definitely in running like a board game club, this is a line that we frequently talk about, where there are people who are like very nice and very well-meaning, but you kind of hope that they don't show up. You know what I mean? Because they might be good at games, but they're often not good at like the socializing aspect of it. And things are more fun if they're not around. But at the same time, like, they're good people and you like them and you want to, it's like this balance of, that's actually like quite difficult. So anyhow, there's some nuance to it. I don't want people to come away from listening to the way that I talk with the idea that I like hate autistic people or something like that. I'm just very aware that hanging out with these people is a challenge. You know what I mean? And definitely there are like a lot of traits to me personally as a person where people will be like, whoa, what's up with that Aspie or whatever there. So not like the most social individual and, like, etc. So it's worth considering. For me, I hear a lot of the word they use heavy in that context. I think of the Back to the Future and Marty McFly. For him, when he uses it, it's as an 80s word. Not that it can't be in 2020, but it's just a note. Yeah, I think that's a good note on language to consider right there, because keep in mind, we're writing for teenagers, and as full-blown adults here. We're not going to get the language totally right, and it's important to bring somebody in who can consult on how to, so far the advice that I've gotten from like Pegboy is just don't use slang at all if you can avoid it, and we're trying to avoid it there. I don't feel strongly enough to take that out at this time, but it's worth considering. Definitely, if we have something that will like aggressively knock somebody's suspension of disbelief, we want to take that out. And so, like, any point where you're like, this takes me out of the story, it's worth re-knowing, because that's something where I really want to focus on it and be like, because I don't want people thinking about Marty McFly in that scene. It's like, whoa, heavy doc. No, like I all those movies were trash. Really, just the third one was trash. And the second one was kind of cool, but still not very memorable. I just think time travel is horseshit as a mechanic in general. Very few things that include time travel are things I enjoy at all. I think one exception to that rule is like the whole Test of the Twins or Time of the Twins or whatever Dragonlance series. which was like magical time travel. So it was a little bit more believable, just in terms of paradox. You just have a looser set of requirements for fantasy novels than you do for like scientifically trying to work out how. Oh wait. Oh, we got $10 from Spathywah while it was going on. I don't know what it said on the chat, but thank you, Spathy. I missed that. We can pull it up in Streamlabs maybe, but. Oh, hold on. Let me turn this off as silent. If people message me, I do have to answer. Because I'm working from homeless. Lasso would probably be thrilled. Lasso would be thrilled. Yeah, I definitely. I think like her mother is definitely the type of person who would be super jazzed if she were to talk about joining the military, which is kind of an interesting point. Most people would, I think. It said shout outs to Krav Maga. Would the military let you in? Freya asked, without thought. Freya asked. She instantly regretted. For a second, Freya asked and then instantly regretted. Freya asked and then instantly felt regret. For a second, Dan didn't understand what she meant, and he winced when he got it. Sorry, she said quickly. No, it's okay. The hospital recorded the Valium thing as an accidental overdose instead of an attempt. I told them I was just trying to get high. Freya noticed how Dan carefully avoided saying the word suicide. I'd probably need a waiver to get in, but the recruiter says it's doable as long as I don't want to be in special forces or anything. Which I don't. I don't even want to be in regular forces. I don't know what I want to major in. I don't even know what I would major in if I could get a scholarship. I really need to figure it all out soon. Okay, so I like that. Listening to the conflict in his voice, Freya was conscious that she would never have to worry about money for college. She didn't have to work at a diner to pay for gas and Krav Maga. She had 2 more years to decide what she wanted to study at college. Her life was so easy compared to Dan, and still it was more than she could stand. And it was still more than she could stand. They were pulling into the entrance to the park. The dark skeletons of black willow trees loomed on either side of the road. Yeah, well, why don't I actually read that paragraph instead of just blogging through it with that mush mouth? Listening to the conflict in his voice, Freya was conscious that she would never have to worry about money for college. She didn't have to work at a diner to pay for gas and Krav Maga. She had 2 more years to decide what she wanted to study at college. Her life was so easy compared to Dan's, and it was still more than she could stand. They were pulling into the entrance to the park. The dark skeletons of black willow trees loomed on either. So, I don't want to have more than one instance of calling bare trees denuded. They were pulling into the entrance to the park. The road to the track was lined with black willow seed. Mm-hmm. They were pulling into the entrance to the park. Black willow trees lined the road to the track on both sides. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. They were pulling into the entrance to the park. Black willow trees rose on both sides of the road. What would you do in the military? Freya asked. Medic, if I score high enough. I don't want to kill anybody, but I'm not afraid to die either. Dan pulled into a spot and Dan pulled the Toyota into a space and threw the car in park. Freya reached over and put her hand over his on the gear shift, meeting his eyes. Wait till after the run to die, please. So yeah, croak. Can we use croak? Yeah. Wait till after the run to croak, please, she said, when he expected her to be serious. Then he slumped his head back against the driver's seat with his eyes rolled up and his tongue stuck out. She shoved his shoulder and got out of the car before he could respond. Shoved his shoulder and left him behind. Mm-hmm. 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 They stretched and jogged a quick warm-up lap to get each other's measure, and then they began to run. At first, Freya was worried Dan would try to talk with her during the run, and she wouldn't be able to keep up with him. At first, Dan was worried Dan would try to clown around or talk with her. Would clown around or talk with her during the run, and she wouldn't be able to keep up with him. But he wasn't the type to waste breath on chatting, and she could match his pace without strain. 5 laps in, she realized this was exactly what she needed. With every lap, her mind grew clearer. The endless tumbling of her thoughts slowed. She was gaining distance. She looked over at Dan less and less, focusing on the track in front of her. The sound of soles hitting the track. Focusing on the ground in front of her. The sound of soles hitting the track created a baseline for the chorus of their breathing. The stars were out and the wind sighed around them. The night air was cold and pure. The pain it took to move forward lost significance. The present eclipsed the past, and the future was a glittering gem that raced effortlessly ahead of them, never to be caught. Freya felt like she could run forever. 20 laps had been over long ago, but she wasn't tired, and Dan wasn't either. As her feet drummed against the ground, their perception rose. That perception rose to the forefront of her mind. Dan wasn't either. Dan's feet struck the ground at the same moment Freya's did. He breathed in unison with her. Their hearts were beating in time. I don't think we need even there. Okay. Oh, Lord. I just lost hub.ny.us. Uh-oh. Wait. So Darth Painus says, "Skinny soy girl cowards attack me, and now I'm suing. Please donate to keep us going to support an independent pro-Israel big oil voice." Lol. So Axel Boost says that the stream is not showing for me. Yeah, no, it's over. It's happening. I just restart. Okay, so I just said refresh. It's up. Because as far as I know, the stream is working out. But, you know, ny.us hub just split, so maybe there's some big Verizon happening going down. Twitch does show as being online to me, though, so we'll have to see. Oh, yeah, I think even their hearts were beating in time. There was warmth at her hip, and the doubling sensation became more and more apparent. The strange feeling had come on slow and subtle as they were preoccupied with the run, and it was deeper. It felt deeper than the night before. 2 sets of eyes and ears heard and saw as one, racing against the night. Dan flickered with alarm, but Freya pushed back at the fear. She didn't want the feeling to end. Okay, yeah, so let me know if you are able to view this on Twitch, people. If there's something wrong with Twitch, you can always hop on to YouTube there. And yeah, I don't show any drop frames or anything. It all looks good to me. Dan flickered with alarm, and Freya pushed back at... And Freya pushed back. She didn't want the feeling to end. It was a trained response she'd picked up from playing guitar. He didn't stop playing when the other person was flowing. Dan's steps faltered first, and Freya ran a few steps past him. She wanted to keep going. The disconnect between their desires was like a tug of war. Dan's breath came in great heaving pulls that desynchronized them. He was teetering on the edge of throwing up. His nausea triggered her own, and they shut their eyes tightly, fighting back the feeling. Am I high? It was a thought. Dan hadn't spoken, but she heard it. But she heard the sub-vocalization as clearly as if he'd shouted it. She felt the flicker of thoughts that accompanied it. Fear that he was making a fool of himself, suspicion that Freya had drugged him somehow, all set against the feeling of hitting a wall, exhaustion closing in. She could see all the anxieties forever churning beneath his facade, and he could see hers. They felt naked. No, everything is okay. Freya reached out and set her hand on Dan's arm. They felt the double sensation of touching and being touched. Their eyes met. So I want shuddered is the wrong word there because it carries too much pleasure. Shivered is closer. Yeah, I think shivered because quiver is. Yeah, what we're going for there is that like, you know, that kind of feeling, not the. So somebody broke FNet yet again. The dream. In the dream, they had shared a single body, and now they stood on the track, reeling with the same strange synchronicity. Dan wanted to shut his eyes, cover his ears, and scream at the intrusion. Freya was stung by his rejection. She flinched away. She felt Dan plunging with his error. Yeah, we can't have reconciliatory empathy. That's just you can't say that. Sorry. I like it, but you can't say it. It's not you, I'm afraid. The thoughts seemed to originate from both of them at once. The distinction between them was blurring. They took a step closer. Their hands sought the other, and they stood palm to palm, eyes joined. Unity. It was a feeling that each of them had been searching for their whole lives without knowing. The perfect moment thrummed between them. They had to expand to contain it. Freya and Dan stood together on the dark running track beneath the stars, closer than any human beings had ever been before. The feeling was vast, too large for either of them to contain on their own. They struggled to arrive on a definition of what was happening. There were no words for this yet. Each mind was seeking a way to describe the novel emotion, but nothing quite fit. Running too hard, lifting too much weight, struggling to comprehend a problem, eating too much. Freya had a sudden and visceral association to straining on the toilet. Oh God. She couldn't believe her mind had gone there. Her embarrassment was sudden and staggering. A full body cringed like she'd been sheared in half. She tried to retreat, burying her face in her hands and screwing her eyes shut, but both gestures were useless. Dan was still behind her eyes. There was no hiding from him. She peered at him through her fingers, burning with shame. Dan had a seasick expression on his face, but it wasn't disgust. He was trying to hold back his own associations, and he couldn't do it. For a moment, they were, so nauseous isn't right there. Let's look. Rough. And for a moment, they were caught in an involuntary cycle of gross thoughts. And the harder they tried to push the images away, the stronger they became. Freya felt herself beginning to panic, and Dan reached out and greased her hand. Greased her hand. He's fucking greasing her palm. Like, yeah, I'll give you $1 if you form a psychic gestalt with me. Let's see. He squeezed so insistently he was on the edge of hurting. So insistent it bordered on painful. Breathe, Dan exhorted her, the word too clear in the frigid air. There was a discontinuity between them. Her whirl of shame threatened to capsize the whole thing. Dan struggled to construct some sort of reassurance. Dan tried to reassure her, but she could read the web of impulses before every word formed. She was too focused on the There was discontinuity between them. Her whirl of shame threatened to capsize the whole thing. Dan tried to reassure her, but she could read the web of his impulses before each form. Oh. The web of impulses before every word form. I like that idea of like pre-word formation thought. There was a twist of frustration pulling at his temples. He wanted so badly to explain, and he couldn't do it. Dan drew a deep breath through his nose, and she felt the sudden thrust of concentration. He was trying to find a way to project his thoughts to her. At first, it was like trying to force something in sideways. There was no give, and they each felt the dangerous pangs heralding a bad headache. Each felt pangs heralding a bad headache. But there was a flash of comprehension. He stopped sub-vocalizing, and his fumbling words became vivid images. She was suddenly... Mm-hmm. Freya was dazed by the intensity of Dan's thoughts. They'd been whispering in a dark audience before, and now the house lights were up. The stage of his mind was fully illuminated. She was being bombarded with his thoughts. She could feel him sensing her panic and fighting to modulate it. It was as if he'd just learned to speak and he could only scream. Ooh, so like interesting how this is all going out here. Like difficult to get the language right on it because we're well outside. Like I very seldom will have the issue where sorry that I'm like mentally screaming inside of your skull. So it's a little hard to relate. Too brilliant. Freya was dazed by the intensity of Dan's thoughts. They'd been whispering in a dark audience before, and now the house lights were up. The stage of his mind was fully illuminated. Dan's thoughts were overwhelming hers. Freya clenched his hand, afraid. She could feel him sensing her panic and fighting to modulate his projection. It was as if he'd just learned to speak and could only scream. He was remembering the morning they'd been inside of each other, masturbating at their reflections, and the recollection was so vivid she felt she was in danger of being overridden. He remembered every detail of their bodies, and he pored over the memory. She knew what he was trying to do. He was remembering the morning they'd been inside of each other, masturbating at their reflections, and the recollection was so vivid she felt in danger of being overwritten. Dan remembered every detail of their bodies. Mm-hmm. Okay. Deep breath. Good God. Difficult chapter, man. Oh wow. Now they all join him back FNet was reconnecting to itself. Whew. We're the same. We're both human, he meant. But the contrast between the way they thought was so stark. It was as if their conversations before had been Dan fumbling along in a foreign language, and now he'd swapped to his native tongue. The lines of his memories were razor sharp where hers tapered into shadow. His surfaces bore intricate. Mm-hmm. His visualizations were intricately detailed where hers slipped into a fog. The way Dan viewed the world had a dimensionality that was almost otherworldly to Freya. There was so much more to him than she thought. Okay, yeah. All the times where he'd struggled with something, all the times where Dan had struggled with something she'd said, or where she'd arrived at his conclusion midway through his sentence, she'd suspected she was just smarter than him. Freya had suspected she was just smarter than him. She had never expected a depth like this, something wholly beyond her. For a moment she felt shame, but she found him caught in the same... Okay. For a moment she felt ashamed, but Dan was in the same axis. Dan was caught between the, yeah. In the same axis between shame and awe. For all their intensity and precision, his constructs stopped at the surface. He could not fathom the nuance and scope of Freya's perception. The way each thought branched into countless avenues he never would have even considered. There was a powerful, tranquil force organizing her thoughts that he simply didn't have, and he keenly felt the lack. Okay. This, starting with the force something in sideways, which is just like a little bit too sexual of a metaphor here, or simile in this case. It's a little much, but we do want to have some of that intrusiveness there. This whole, in fact, this whole chapter will need another edit. So, like for the final right here. Okay. Yeah, it's just there's a lot of exposition. It's a very difficult, like what's trying to be conveyed is difficult, but it's really going to need more work on this chapter here. So, and just some of these chapters we just got to put down, you know, like, hey, we can't get this immediately. We got to keep working at it. Like, I like what's happening. I really like what's going on in this chapter. This is, you can feel like the effort of me, like trying to get outside of who I am and what I'm capable of and everything. And I feel there's no shame in not, when you're trying to do something really hard like that, you can't immediately get the mark. You know, it's going to take a few cracks at this to really get it down. And you may need help from somebody else because it's not an easy thing to write about. It's going to be very difficult to get this right. And like the core part of this book, like this is a chapter where this has to be perfect. So definitely making a note here. We're going to have to come back. I love that that she just imagines this guy's dumber than her, but she just doesn't understand that they think differently. Like he has all these capabilities that she doesn't have. She has all these capabilities that he doesn't have. One of the things that I really want to focus on in this book is sort of the meaningless of some of the distinctions of who's smarter and who's this and who's that. Like definitely those strata of skills and measurable things exist. But in the total sum of what it would be like to think as another person, like how much does it really matter if somebody knows more about Pokemon than you, or they did, you know, better on the fucking GMAT or whatever there. Yeah, we really, really want to get deep on that concept of just how differently people think. And I may be wrong there, you know, like I got to tell you, I very seldom indulge in telepathy with another person. Maybe people think more similarly than I suspect, but just from dealing with people, I want to say that I've definitely met people where I know right away there's a lot going on under the hood that's very like vastly foreign to my own experience. And as we get older too, we self-select more for people who are much like ourselves. And like our view of the world starts to close in a little bit. We're like less open, less able to perceive things that are like radically different from us. You'll see a lot of people who are fiction readers slowly lapse into reading like a lot more nonfiction because they can no longer make that leap so much. And yeah, just kind of like an interesting spot to get at right there. Really, really like the idea of just trying to fathom what's going on in other, because you know it's like one of those mysteries like we can never really know. As like trite as it is to like hop into the, do people see the same color I see and so forth. You know, it's a whole different engine of perception tunneling over there. So hmm. Dan summoned memories, trying to fathom the gulf between them. They spilled into her being like ink. Wherever she was touched, Freya's own memories bloomed, responding to the disturbance. There was a curious blending as their memories ran together. It became more difficult to tell what had happened to who, or if the distinction was even important. They were fascinated with themselves, wheeling deeper and deeper inward. They had been standing in the field with the wind blowing around them for a long time. The heat of their run was long gone. There were nagging feelings that they should get out of the cold, but neither was willing to stop and risk the moment. Dan's memories had an addictive quality. Dan's memories had an addictive quality for Freya. His experience was so different from her own, as if he'd grown up on another planet. Freya was an only child. She'd grown up cocooned in Lassa's neurotic desire for order. Her childhood was long stretches of inward-turning silence, solitude punctuated by interactions with adults. Dan had had company from... Dan had company from the day he was born. His sister was there for all of his adventures. As they grew up, their neighborhood was full of children running wild with them in the cypress swamp behind their house, where they proclaimed themselves prince and princess of their flooded domain. Freya watched Dan and Angie proclaim themselves prince and princess of their flooded domain from atop a rickety trellis that swayed perilously underfoot. Their house was full of sound and clutter. There were 2 cats, a dog, and 2 parakeets, a rotating cast of aunts and cousins. There were always people around. While she'd been despairing for something to break the silence... While Freya... despaired for something to pierce the silence, Dan was yearning for it, desperate for a break from the chaos. Suddenly she understood why there was no music in his car, why he spent so much time running on his own. Dan was just as interested in Freya. She tried to share pieces of herself with him, but they were such meager offerings compared with the wealth of his memories. It wasn't just that his recollection had more fidelity, it was the way that he remembered, tying everything into his sense of smell. Instead of discrete moments, he remembered things in eras, whole stretches of times where there was a predominant scent and an emotion he had associated with it. He could perfectly recall the faint scent of mildew suffusing everything indoors at his grandmother's house, and the mounting dread of her slow disintegration. Tied into the sharp scent of pine needles and palmettos was a neighborhood boy who called him names and whipped pine cones at him, until a day where, we should be cutting much of this. All right, let's try to get through it. So Weekends were the salty, decaying scent of the beach, where Dan's parents always fought, and he and his sister would hold hands and huddle with their heads low. Freya was absorbed in his memory of a green-black squall rushing at them with wind howling all around them, cold beads of rain pelting them as they gathered their things and rushed for the car. She wanted all of it, wanted to live inside of his skin, to forget about Freya entirely. The feeling alarmed Dan, and she felt the rise of a miserable sense of inadequacy. She thought she could be a writer of songs, a poet. This whole time she hadn't even been alive. She'd just been a specter, tugging at the fringes. No, it's not like that, Dan was saying, but she could feel a swelling wave of pity, and she shut her eyes tightly and felt tears squeezing from them and running down her face. There was a surprising darkness. She didn't see through his eyes any longer. Then it was gone. The last thing they felt together was the starball's heat in Freya's pocket. The connection was severed. "I'm sorry," Freya said, her voice sounding strange as it echoed only in her own skull. "I fucked it up." Dan was aggrieved. His eyes shot around them, as if trying to find the thing that they'd lost. "No," he breathed, and it was almost a whimper. He looked at his own hands, opening and closing them, and he looked to her. She didn't mirror the movement. "Oh my God, no," he began to cry. Tears ran down his face in the moonlight. He slumped onto the track and then curled into a ball and cried. Freya sank to join him, and together they wept on the cold ground, their sobs disappearing into the night. Neither of them could find the strength to go on. Freya could feel the starball at work, burning in her pocket as it... Freya could feel the starball at work, burning in her pocket when everything else was numb. It was trying to bring them back. She could feel the equalizing force of the starball knifing through her despairs. If they didn't get up and go somewhere warm soon, they were going to get hypothermia. They could literally die of sadness. "Dan, get up," Freya said. Her voice seemed impossibly small against the enormity of the night. He didn't respond. "Dan," she demanded, shaking him. He opened his eyes and they were distant, slow to focus. "Dan, come on. We can't stay here." He nodded and rose awkwardly onto the field. They could barely walk. Together they staggered across the field to his car, and with numb hands he fumbled with his keys. The ignition caught on the second try, and he cranked the heat as high as it would go. "It hurts," was all he could manage, and she nodded in agreement. They had been whole, but now they were shattered. She threw her arms around Dan and hugged him as hard as she could. But the gesture felt useless and insignificant. No embrace could repair this. Compared to what they'd lost, they were as distant and lonely as the stars. Whew. It's a wild fucking chapter right there. Whew. So, yeah, I think we're trying to go too far, too fast in that chapter. It is probably one that if I'm able to do another editing session later today, we should probably revisit this chapter immediately, at least the second half of it there. But a lot of things that I like there. I like the way that they're trying to get into both characters' heads. I like the idea that after they touch this thing, immediately they're like, "Oh fuck, what have I done? What have I lost?" and so forth. This addictive quality of seeing through someone else's eyes. So that's really interesting to me. I'm very happy with where this chapter is trying to go, and I think one or two more passes of editing, and we could potentially get somewhere with it. But yeah, very difficult chapter. And I like that now we're like recognizing a little bit more. Like these are the chapters where when I was trying to write it, I did not have enough skill to carry off what I want to accomplish there. And it's possible I still don't have it, but I'm gonna try. All right, so yeah, I've been kind of sorry for getting here a little late this morning. I appreciate the people coming through on this one right here. Yeah, I need to work through like I just have like a little turbulence from I think like trying too hard, and work has also been kind of fucking difficult at the moment. But I'm gonna try and get back into the swing of things soon. And I do think that we're still doing good work. I'm glad that we get up and do this every day. And you know, I think we will hit our stride again as we continue to try and finish this guy. So good work, everybody, and have a good day. Peace pump. Yes, it is indeed.